This video will help you with equations that involve using the distributive property. First, you want to undo the parentheses. And then, just like all other equations, your goal is to isolate the variable. For your 100 equations unit, test number 6 is on the distributive property, and there are 10 questions for a total of 10 points. Let's look at a couple examples. As I mentioned, the goal when solving equations is always to isolate the variable. So in this equation, we're going to isolate the t, but because we have parentheses, we want to undo those first by applying the distributive property. 4 times 9 is 36. 4 times 3t is 12t. And we have that as equaling -6, and now we are back to a two-step equation where we are still trying to isolate that t. So the first thing we're going to do is subtract the constant 36, subtract 36, and we're left with 12t is equal to -42. Again, make sure that when you're dealing with negatives, you understand that -6 take away 32 is not -30, but -42. And even though it's not a nice, neat number, an integer that t ends up equaling in this equation, go ahead and show that last step of dividing by 12 so that you can see that t is equal to -42 over 12. And yes, I would expect you to reduce that. Half of 42 is 21, and half of 12 is 6, and that can be further reduced by 3. 3 into -21 is -7, and 3 into 6 is 2. Of course, you could take that a step further if you want to, but it's not necessary. -3.5 would also be fine, or -3.5. Again, something that I'm not always good about doing but should do is take that final answer and plug it back in for my t. So if I take 3.5 negative times by 3 and then add 9 and then multiply by 4, I get -6. So that does check out for that answer. For this next example, we are going to distribute the 2 to the 7x and the -1. So we have 14x minus 2 equals 6, and back to a two-step equation. So adding 2 to isolate the 14x first, and we get 14x is equal to 8. Divide by 14, divide by 14. X equals 8/14, but I would expect you to reduce that to 4/7. For this next problem, don't let the fraction distract you. We're still going to distribute that to what's inside of the parentheses. So we have 1/2 x, and then 1/2 of -8 would be -4, and then equals -2. Add the constant here, 4, to isolate 1/2 x. We get 1/2 x is equal to 2. And then when we multiply by 2, we get x equals 4. Finally, this last example, just make sure you're watching the negatives. When you distribute the -9 to the 8, you get -72. And then -9 times -m would be plus 9m equals 5. Add 72 to isolate the 9m. 9m is equal to 77. Divide by 9, divide by 9. On this one, it would be okay to leave it as 77 over 9 since that cannot be simplified. If you wanted to take a step further and change it to a mixed number, you could. That would be 8 for 72. 8 and 5/9 would also be acceptable. I would not expect you to go a step further to change that to a decimal because, like I said at the very beginning, an improper fraction like 77/9 is perfectly fine if it can't be reduced. So just remember, when you are solving equations, if there are parentheses, then you need to distribute.